Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. And just a couple of announcements. The first thing is in August, I think it's August 2nd is the first date. I'm teaching this 15 class, it actually is 2 courses, 15 classes total, for people who are interested in our Nutrition and Educator program, but saying to themselves, gosh, it's a huge commitment. And it is. It's the alternative for people who would like to have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, but don't want to get a dietetics degree for a variety of reasons. So this is your opportunity to get some credits toward this program if you decide to enroll, but to try it out. And then at Thanksgiving, when we finish, you can say, well, either I know I can do it, I'm ready to sign up for homework every week, and I like the assignments and the teaching methods and all that kind of stuff, or not for me, glad I learned a lot of cool stuff, but it's just not going to be what I do. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. And if you're interested in any of our professional development programs or just trying to figure out what you're going to be when you grow up, if you're going to leave institutional medicine, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Our model of medicine and healthcare is incredibly beneficial to people. And if we had 1 million people doing this right now, there wouldn't be enough people to meet the demand as the word gets out there. And people become increasingly unhappy with the choices available to them and that sort of thing. So my email address, pampopper@msn.com. All right, so it's that time of year again. Summer's finally here. The sun is shining, at least on some days, and every day that I can, I lay out in the sun and tan for a bit. Everybody should make sure to get sun on as much of the body as possible. So shorts and a tank top or a bathing suit is best. And you should get a tan every year. If you're lucky enough to live in a place like Florida, well, you can be tan year round. That's fabulous. Now, the biggest reason why people don't do this is fear of skin cancer. The sunscreen industry has brainwashed people to think that sun exposure is dangerous, which of course creates demand for sunscreen. The vitamin D makers have convinced people that they don't need the sun. They can just take vitamin D pills, which, by the way, do not remotely resemble vitamin D produced in response to sun exposure. 10 different types of vitamin D and thousands of photo products like nitric oxide, which helps to keep the blood vessels open and the blood flowing. Vitamin D3 in a pill, nothing like the natural thing. And by the way, I always have to insert vitamin D is actually a hormone, not a vitamin, which is why it's not in food. So here are the real facts, however, getting back to skin cancer. There has been an increase in the diagnosis of skin cancer, but death rates haven't really increased, and sun is not the cause of these diagnoses. So what's really going on? Well, according to an article in the British Journal of Dermatology, what we're experiencing is an epidemic of overdiagnosis, not an epidemic of skin cancer. This is due to a phenomenon known as diagnostic drift. The panic about skin cancer leads to increased screening, which then leads to increased diagnoses of more benign disease. In fact, the researchers reported that almost the entire increase in the incidence of skin cancer was due to minimal stage 1 disease. They wrote, quote, there was no change in the combined incidence of other states of the disease, and the overall mortality only increased from 2.16 to 2.54 cases per 100,000 per year. The researchers further reported that the location of these lesions did not correspond to the sites of lesions caused by sun exposure. And in their conclusion, they wrote, quote, these findings should lead to a reconsideration of the treatment of early lesions, a search for better diagnostic methods to distinguish them from truly malignant melanomas, reevaluation of the role of ultraviolet radiation and recommendations for protection from it, as well as the need for a new direction in the search for the cause of melanoma. What this all means is that cancer is like all other cancers. Too much testing leads to diagnosing abnormalities that aren't really cancer, calling these abnormalities cancer anyway, and then treating them like cancer. Really profitable for medical institutions, doctors, and drug companies, actually not so great for patients. This article was published over 10 years ago in 2009, and obviously nothing has changed. Melanoma is still attributed to sun exposure, and these skin lesions are still being diagnosed as cancer when they're not. People are still slathering themselves with sunscreen and taking vitamin D and hanging out with doctors who find non-cancerous lesions and tell patients they have skin cancer to stay out of the sun. It just goes on and on. As with so many medical issues, the truth is actually the opposite of what people are being told. If you look into the research carefully, you will find avoiding the sun is a risk factor for all-cause mortality of a similar magnitude as smoking. Now, we all know we're not supposed to smoke, and smoking increases the risk of cancer and early death. Well, so does sun avoidance. Sun avoidance is not even advisable for skin cancer patients. Survival rates are higher for skin cancer patients who spend time in the sun, and all-cause mortality has been shown to be 4 times higher in people who have non-melanoma skin cancer as a result of avoiding sun exposure as compared to a group of patients who had the highest amount of sun exposure. So even when people are diagnosed with skin cancer, they're told to stay out of the sun, and that increases their death rate from all-cause mortality. Furthermore, vitamin D pills are not a substitute. And I'm just going to give you an example. The medical literature is full of this stuff too. A study of multiple sclerosis patients and controls showed that increased sun exposure led to less neurodegeneration, increased gray matter volume, and whole brain volume independent of vitamin D levels. The researchers concluded that MS patients may be better off with lower vitamin D levels and sun exposure than higher vitamin D levels from supplementation. So in this study, multiple sclerosis patients were randomized to sun and vitamin D supplementation. Vitamin D supplementation resulted in higher plasma levels of vitamin D, but sun exposure resulted in actual positive changes in the health of the MS patients, even though their vitamin D levels didn't spike up as much as they did from as the controls who took vitamin D. So last but not least, so that's why going back to this, that's why the researchers said it would be better to have lower levels of vitamin D and get out in the sun than to target plasma levels of vitamin D as the goal, and you have no improvement as a result of it. So last but not least, the question of what causes skin cancer. What is it if it's not the sun? Well, it's the usual suspects: diet, hydration, weight status, inflammation levels, prescription and over-the-counter drugs, and sleep and rest and stress and exercise habits, right? That's how you reduce the risk of all cancers and almost all cancers and almost all other things too. One last thing, for those who tend to burn. There's a growing body of evidence showing that high consumption of fruits and vegetables can prevent sunburn. The same antioxidants and phytochemicals in plants that protect them from death while they're exposed to enormous amounts of sun for very extended lengths of time will protect humans too if you eat enough plants. This has certainly been our experience. Members who claim that they couldn't tolerate even 10 minutes of sunlight without burning are able to tan after they change their diets. Now, one point on which we all agree is sunburn is harmful, so pace yourself. Start with minimal sun exposure and increase carefully over time. But do get out in the sun. Humans need sunlight, just like they need food and water and rest. So that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anyone who you think would benefit from watching it, and I'll be back to you tomorrow with more news.